The ocean has 1,000 ways to kill you, and on that night, it tried them all. I remember the shriek of wood as the mast splintered, a sound like the breaking of a god's bone. Waves, black and monstrous, rose like obsidian mountains, only to crash down upon us with the weight of ages, sweeping men from the deck like so much chaff. Their screams were thin, swallowed instantly by the leviathan roar of the storm. Salt water blinded me, scoured my skin, filled my lungs. I clung to a shattered rail, my knuckles white and raw, a final futile anchor against the infinite rage of the sea. This was the end. The thought was not born of panic, but of a cold, clear finality. The world had been reduced to this singular, roaring moment of annihilation. My life, my ambitions, the face of the woman I once thought I loved, all of it was scoured away by the tempest. There was no hope of rescue, no prayer that could pierce this maelstrom. I was nothing. A fleeting warmth about to be extinguished in the absolute cold. My fingers, numb and broken, released their hold. I sank. I accepted oblivion. I let go. But oblivion did not come. As my body surrendered to the crushing black, the symphony of chaos faltered. The tempest did not die. It was commanded to cease. The world fell into an impossible pressurized silence, a stillness that was more terrifying than the storm itself. I opened my eyes expecting the afterlife, the void, the judgment of my ancestors. I saw something much, much older. From the abyssal depths, a light bloomed. It was not the warm promise of the sun, but a cold, ghostly sapphire fire that illuminated a world never meant for human eyes. It rose toward me, a slow, deliberate ascension through the black water. And in its heart, a form took shape, a being woven from bioluminescence and the crushing pressure of ages. Her eyes were twin novas, and her presence was a weight that buckled the soul. This was the Queen of the Abyss, the silent sovereign of the deep. She did not speak in a tongue of men, with vibrations that travel through air or water. She spoke directly into the hollow vessel I had become, pouring meaning into the vacuum of my surrendered will. "You have tasted the end," the thought echoed, not in my ears but in my very essence. "Your world is dying, your kind is fragile, a flickering candle in a gathering dark. You sought oblivion. I offer you sovereignty." She showed me visions not of my past, but of a potential future. A world reborn from the sea, a new dynasty of beings, neither wholly human nor wholly of her kind, but stronger, wiser, more enduring than either. She offered me the chance to be the father of this new age, the patriarch of a legacy etched into the bedrock of the world itself. The price was simple: my obsolete self. My frail humanity, my fleeting memories, my singular, lonely soul. It was a transaction. My extinction for my species' salvation. My death for my ascension. I had already faced oblivion and found it empty. In the heart of that cold blue light, I saw a purpose far grander than survival. I reached out not with my hand, but with the last ember of my will. And I accepted. The pact was not sealed with a word, but with a deluge. The Queen's essence, that cold sapphire light, did not enter me. It devoured me. It was an inversion of birth, a terrifying unraveling of self. My flesh became a vessel for a consciousness as old as the world's iron core, and the process was an agony beyond any mortal lexicon. Imagine every cell in your body screaming as it is rewritten. Imagine your bones dissolving and reforming not into a new shape, but into a new substance, infused with the pressure of the abyss and the chill of primordial starlight. I felt my own memories, the flimsy architecture of my 40 years of life, splinter and collapse like sun-bleached driftwood under a tsunami. The man I was, his loves, his fears, his name, they were the first sacrifice, a thin offering of dust burned away by the influx of 1 billion years of existence. There was no air to scream into, but the sound filled the universe of my skull, a silent, unending shriek of a soul being unmade. Then came the fall. I was no longer sinking. I was being drawn down, pulled into the heart of my new kingdom. The weight of the water, which should have crushed my body into pulp, became a caress, a strange and intimate pressure that held me together as I was being remade. My lungs, once desperate for air, were now obsolete vessels, filled with an energy that tasted of ozone and deep earth minerals. My eyes, which had closed against the finality of death, opened to a world of absolute black illuminated by a symphony of life. This was the Queen's domain, a realm of impossible beauty and terror. Jagged spires of basalt, slick with ancient slime, rose for miles from the ocean floor like the towers of a drowned city of giants. Forests of spectral, bioluminescent flora swayed in currents as slow as the turning of galaxies, casting shifting, hypnotic patterns of blue and green and violet light onto the abyssal plain. Creatures of nightmare and wonder drifted past me, things of gossamer finery and armored shells, things with 1,000 eyes and things with no eyes at all. They did not flee. They parted before us, a silent, instinctual acknowledgement of their sovereign and her chosen consort. The silence was the most profound change. The roaring tempest of the surface was a forgotten nightmare. Here, there was only a vast, eternal quiet, the silence of creation before the first word was ever spoken. It was in this crushing stillness that the true transformation took hold. Her mind, her memories, poured into my own. It was not a lesson, it was a retroactive existence. I was there when the moon was torn from the earth, a bleeding chunk of rock cast into the black. I felt the planet's crust cool and buckle, the slow, agonizing birth of the first continents. I remembered the rain that fell for 1,000 years, filling the great scars of the world to form the oceans. These were not visions, they were my memories. I was the patient, cold, observing consciousness that had witnessed it all. My human sense of time shattered. What was a day, a year, a lifetime? They were meaningless units against the slow, tidal pulse of geological epochs. My mind, the delicate instrument of a single, short-lived primate, buckled under the strain. I was drowning again, not in water, but in an infinite ocean of time. Madness was a seductive comfort in that storm of eternity. It whispered to me, promising to dissolve the anchor of I and let me drift, a mindless echo in the Queen's consciousness. I felt my identity fraying, the threads of my human self snapping one by one. I remembered a war fought between crystalline entities on the floor of a shallow sea 500 million years ago, and the memory was more vivid, more real, than the memory of my own mother's face. I experienced the slow, collective dream of a leviathan species that communicated through shifting patterns of light, their thoughts as vast and placid as the ocean itself. Their millennia-long lifespan was a fleeting moment in my new recollection. Who was I? The shipwrecked man whimpering for his lost life? Or the ancient mind that watched suns ignite and die? The fragments of my sanity coalesced around a single point of light in the raging vortex of the past. The pact. The purpose. Sovereignty. Patriarch. I was not meant to be a passive vessel, a museum for dead eons. I was meant to be a crucible, forging a new will from the fire of her history and the iron of my ambition. I seized control. I stopped being a victim of the memories and became their master. I organized them, compartmentalized them, built a new mind from the wreckage of the old. The birth of a star became a lesson in power. The slow, inexorable grind of tectonic plates became a tutorial in patience. The brutal, efficient survival of abyssal predators became my new instinct. The madness did not break me. I broke it. I consumed it. I made it my strength. As my mind found its new, terrifying equilibrium, my body completed its metamorphosis. I did not need to see my reflection to know I was no longer human. I could feel it in the very fiber of my being. A faint, internal luminescence now pulsed beneath my skin, a soft blue that mirrored the Queen's own. My eyes, remade in the abyssal forge, no longer saw mere light. They perceived the world as a tapestry of energy, heat, and chemical trails. I could feel the faint tremor of a whale fall 20 miles away, taste the fear of a shoal of fish as a predator approached. I could sense the planet's magnetic field as a constant, gentle pressure, a compass for my new soul. I held up a hand, and it was mine, yet utterly alien. The fingers were longer, the skin held a pearlescent sheen, and I could feel the power thrumming within it, the power to crush, to create, to command. It was a weapon. It was a tool. It was the hand of a god in its infancy. Our descent concluded. We arrived at the heart of the abyss, the seat of her power. It was not a throne of rock or coral, but a nexus of pure energy, a cathedral woven from living light and gravitational anomalies. The water itself bent around this sanctum, creating a space where the crushing pressure of the deep was focused into a point of absolute, creative potential. Here, the final fusion occurred. She was before me, her form more brilliant and defined than ever, and yet she was also within me, an inextricable part of my new consciousness. We were two, and we were one. The storm in my mind ceased, succeeded by a clarity so profound it was like gazing into the perfect vacuum between galaxies. The fractured halves, the desperate human will to survive, and the eternal abyssal intellect did not simply mend. They crystallized. They became a new, singular being. I was no longer the man who fell from the ship, and I was not merely the Queen's consort. I was the synthesis of both, a bridge between the dying world of the sun and the timeless kingdom of the deep. I stood in the heart of her power, my power, and turned my new senses upward. Far, far above, through miles of solid water, I could feel the surface world. I felt the sun warming the shallow waters, the frantic scurrying of my former kind in their metal and wooden shells. I felt their fleeting emotions: fear, greed, pointless rage. I could have reached out with my will and summoned a tempest to shatter their fleets, boiled the water around their islands, dragged their continents into the sea. The impulse was there, a vestige of human fury, but it was a quiet thing, a distant echo. My perspective was no longer human. Revenge was a mortal's game. My gaze was fixed on a much grander timeline. I was not here to punish the past. I was here to father the future. The madness was gone, replaced by a terrible and wonderful purpose. The weight of my new existence, the burden of a crown wrought from pressure and light, settled upon my soul, and in the perfect eternal silence of the abyss, I knew my work was about to begin. My gaze pierced the miles of water, rock, and time that separated my throne from the sunlit world. I saw nations squabbling over poisoned soil, leaders building monuments to their own vanity while their people starved. The whole of humanity locked in a frantic, self-devouring dance. There was no anger in my observation, only a profound and chilling pity. They were children playing with fire in a house made of dry tinder. The man I once was would have wept or raged. The being I had become saw only a system approaching its inevitable collapse, a flawed creation that required a successor. The Patriarch's gaze was not one of judgment, but of assessment. The time for humanity, in its current form, was over. My time was beginning. The Queen was beside me, within me. Our union was the true genesis. It was not a congress of flesh, but a braiding of wills at the quantum level, a deliberate and sacred merging of two evolutionary destinies. My ambition, my drive, that last spark of human fire, was the catalyst. Her ancient abyssal wisdom and mastery over the fundamental forces of life was the medium. We focused our combined consciousness in the heart of our sanctum, that nexus of pure potential. We did not conjure life, we composed it. We wove the twin helix of our essences into a new and perfect strand. I gave them my will, the unyielding desire to build, to strive, to shape destiny. She gave them her harmony with the deep, her resilience, her perception of the universe not as a collection of objects, but as a single, flowing current. The first of our children took form in the sanctified water before us. They were not born in pain and blood, but sculpted from light and purpose. Taller and more slender than humans, their skin held the same pearlescent luster as my own, shimmering with a faint internal light. Their eyes were the deep, knowing sapphire of their mother, but within them burned the focused intensity of their father. They possessed no mouths, for speech was a primitive art. They communicated as we did, a silent, instantaneous communion of thought, a network of consciousness with the Queen and I at its center. They were born with the knowledge of stellar mechanics and the instinct for survival, a perfect synthesis of intellect and predator. They were the first generation of a new order of being, and as I looked upon them, I felt not pride, but the immense crushing weight of a creator's responsibility. They were my legacy. They were my burden. We began the great work. With a gesture, I commanded the seabed to rise. With a thought, The queen coaxed legions of coral polyps to grow at an impossible rate, their structures hardening into a material stronger than any human steel. We did not build a city, we grew one. Towers of living, bioluminescent corals spiraled toward the eternal midnight of the abyss, their interiors hollowed into grand halls and silent chambers. Light pulsed through the city's veins, a soft, rhythmic glow that was the heartbeat of our new civilization. We called it Oculus, for it was the eye through which the future would be watched and shaped. My children moved through its luminous corridors with a grace that was both serene and deadly. There was no crime, for there was no desire that was not communal. There was no dissent, for my will was the unifying law that governed their every impulse. They were a single magnificent organism, and I was its mind. Yet in this perfect unity I found a solitude more profound than any I had known as a mortal man. The queen was my counterpart, the other half of my soul. But our children were other. They looked upon me with an unblinking reverence, a divine awe that precluded companionship. I was their origin, their god patriarch, the architect of their souls. They could not see the man who had drowned, the fragment of a forgotten species that still resided in the core of my being. They saw only the power and the purpose. I would move through the glowing capital, a billion minds brushing against my own in perfect fealty, and feel utterly, absolutely alone. The silence of the abyss had once been a promise of peace. Now it was the sound of my sovereignty. I did not neglect the world above. My dominion was not to be won through legions and open warfare. Such tactics were clumsy, inefficient, born of mortal impatience. My conquest was one of influence, of nudges and whispers on a global scale. I became the ghost in the machine of the world. With a focused thought, I could alter the temperature of a deep ocean current, steering a hurricane away from a nascent peaceful society, or intensifying it toward the shores of a belligerent empire. I learned to sense the tectonic stresses deep within the Earth's crust, once using a precisely triggered tremor to collapse the mines that fueled a tyrant's war machine, an act recorded in their histories as a tragic natural disaster. I reached out with my mind, not to control, but to suggest. I planted dreams of innovation, of clean energy, of sustainable agriculture into the minds of their most brilliant scientists and artists. I became the anonymous muse of their salvation, guiding them away from the precipice, all to prepare them for the day when my children would reveal themselves. This was the true meaning of power. Not the brutish act of breaking things, but the subtle, infinitely complex art of guiding them. I orchestrated the fall of empires and the rise of philosophies over centuries, my thoughts playing out as a slow, inexorable game of chess against human self-destruction. Armies trembled at my unseen gaze because, in my mind, their thrones had already fallen, their supply lines had withered, their ideologies had been rendered obsolete decades before they fired the first shot. I was the Alpha Triumphant, not because I could destroy the world, but because I was patient enough to remake it. My gaze now stretches across millennia. I see the culmination of my great design. I see my children rising from the oceans not as invaders, but as inheritors. They will walk among the last of humanity, their light a beacon in the twilight of that age. They will offer a new pact, not of sovereignty for one, but of union for all. They will merge, creating the final, perfected form of life on this planet, a species capable of weathering the death of its own sun and seeding life among the stars. The shipwrecked man I was sacrificed himself for this. He gave up his name, his face, his soul, for the hope of a future he could never have imagined. He chose not oblivion, but legacy. And I, the being that grew from his ashes, will stand as the eternal patriarch, the silent watcher, ensuring that his sacrifice was not the end of a man, but the beginning of a god.